name is Herbert Kuhner. I'm a poet, translator, and I've collected the works of a forgotten Jewish American poet, Alto Brody. And I have a poem here, which was the first poem by Brody I read, and it's called The Holy Ledger. The Jew, like a mad accountant, trying to make sense out of a senseless ledger, balancing the holy scriptures of his life with double entry bookkeeping, with good and with evil, with reward and with punishment, juggling the accounts to make debit and credit meet, cover up the latest overdraft on his agony. Sometimes, in a moment of revulsion, in a moment of insidious sanity, he flings down his pen, calling God himself to account for the terrible, impossible, inexcusable entries in his book.
How did you come across Brody's work?
Well, a friend of mine, who's a publisher in London, Tony Rudolph, sent me a poem card, and this poem was on it. And when I read the poem, I wrote Tony that I wanted to read more. And he published Alto Brody in an anthology of his international Jewish poetry. And I read those poems. Then Tony gave me the address of Alto Brody's son, and I contacted him, and he sent me more. And so I collected the works, and with an American poet, with George Wallace, we put together the complete works. And George found the poems in magazines, and so we got them all together, and the complete works are 72 poems, and they're going to be published in the English original and a German translation by an Austrian publisher and by an American publisher. The Austrian publisher is the Theodor Kramer Society, and the American publisher is Writers Ink Press. And Brody also wrote 4 one-act plays, which were never produced. And I hope to be able to see to it that they are finally produced. The theme are Old World Jews in the New World. These are short ones. He also wrote long poems, and these are among the first I got.
A little bit longer.
Ghetto Twilight. An infinite weariness comes into the faces of the old tenements as they stand massed together on the block, tall and thoughtfully silent in the enveloping twilight. Pensively, they eye each other across the street through their dim windows with a sad, recognizing stare, watching the red glow fading in the distance at the end of the street, behind the black church spires, watching the vague sky lowering overhead, purple with clouds of colored smoke from the extinguished sunset, watching the tired faces coming home from work like dry-breasted hags welcoming their children to their withered arms. Shall I do one of my own, maybe?
We'll do one of your own.
Yeah. It's about Artie Shaw, and it's called The Stickler of Sticklers. The two biggest sticklers in jazz played the same instrument, the long one with the chrome keys. Yeah, Benny and Artie were the charmers who blew the clarinet. Who was better at it? That's a question the experts are still arguing about. And who was more beloved? That's the question of questions. And here too, we may never come to a conclusion. Ask Evelyn Keyes, and you know who she'd choose. Artie took her with him on one of his 8 trips to the altar. Yeah, Artie was the marrying kind, and the divorcing kind. One of his book titles was The Trouble with Cinderella. One he didn't write was The Trouble with Prince Charming. Evelyn had a habit of placing the toilet paper roll on the holder backwards so that it would unroll from the back rather than the front. This drove Artie mad, and he'd hit the roof of his bathroom. Actually, I do understand his quibbling. My wife has the same habit. Artie couldn't forget this transgression of the toilet, even after the inevitable divorce. But neither could Evelyn. Here's how she put it. Every time I change a toilet roll, I think of Artie Shaw. One of my 241 jazz poems.
Hold it.
After this poem in German, anthology of emigre poets. What language do you dream in? I dream in English. I daydream in French. My nightmares are in German. I'd like to do a gig with Saul Yeager. He is not a disciple of Benny Goodman, he is the disciple. Should I read it?
Yeah.
All right, I'll read it. I don't want to hog the spotlight. I've never read this one.
You're the only one, Harry, in the spotlight.
The Disciple. Saul says he isn't a disciple. He's the disciple. Benny's his God, but he knows that Benny wasn't a perfect deity like the one of the scriptures, but rather a flawed God, like those of the Greek pantheon. Benny was divine as far as the playing goes, but otherwise he was down to earth. Benny the musician may have been out of this world, but as a man, he was very much in it. He may have looked good-natured and avuncular on the bandstand, but he was anything but a good uncle to anyone who played for him. There are anecdotes galore about his tiffs with musicians. Dave Tuff didn't call him Benny Badman for nothing. Saul is informed, and he knows the score. He plays the mentor as well as playing like the mentor. Benny left a legacy of great takes, and Saul has his licks down to a T. I remember Saul at the Metropole on 7th Avenue in the 50s. If you closed your eyes, you could hear and see Benny. And if you left them open, you could see the disciple looking and playing very much like his mentor. That was a while back, but Saul is still at it. And as long as he's with us, Benny too is very much alive. But it must be added, like all good disciples, Saul is not a copycat. Saul Jaeged adds his own inimitable note and notes. So that's the last one I did. Did it for Saul Jaeged. And I hope to do a gig with him, and I'd like to read some poems about him and Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw and Gene Krupa.